Hello everyone! It's the last round of the World Rapid Championship and the situation is quite intense. Carlsen and Anand are tied for the first place and Carlsen faces Alexander Grishchuk on board 1. Well, I don't know if it's really board 1 since Carlsen has his own board that he's playing on. But either board 1 or board 2. And Anand is playing against Carlsen's old nemesis Boo on board 2. Or could be board 1, either way, and Anand makes a draw with Boo on move 12. So Carlsen either has to win this game or he doesn't win sole first in the World Rapid Championship. Because, as you've seen, Carlsen lost his personal game against Anand. So Carlsen has to defeat Grishchuk if he wants to become World Rapid Champion. So let's see how this game goes. And Carlsen has the white pieces. We have knight to f3. He starts with a reti opening. Knight to f6 by Grishchuk, g3, g6 and b3. Bishop to g7, Carlsen goes bishop to b2 and d6. d4, Grishchuk castles, bishop to g2 and knight b to d7. And Carlsen castles. We have rook to d8, rook to e8, sorry, c4 and c6 now. Knight to c3 and e5, and Miroshnichenko said in this position that white definitely doesn't want to play d5, and this is the exact moment when Carlsen played d5. He played d5, and Miroshnichenko said that maybe the idea is that, unlike for other similar positions, the rook is on e8 instead of f8, so maybe that's the reason why d5 works here. Grishchuk captures, we have c captures on d5, and now e4. Carlsen plays knight to d4 and here comes e3 by Grishchuk. And it's already a wild position. Probably the best idea for Carlsen is to play f3. Okay, this will be an annoying pawn on e3, but you know, the game goes on. At least with f3 you stop this knight from infiltrating with knight g4 or knight to d4, e4 if possible. But after e3, Carlsen played f4. Grishchuk immediately jumps in with knight to g4. Now he has some unpleasant ideas of knight coming to f2, and Carlsen plays knight to c2. Probably with the idea of attacking the e3 pawn, and well, knight to e4 does seem like an interesting idea here. You protect the f2 square, the knight can jump to f2, also you attack the d6 pawn. The problem is Grishchuk has knight to c5. And now this knight will get exchanged for this knight, and then knight to f2 is coming either way. But if you capture on c5, then d captures on c5, and you lose a piece. If you move the knight, you lose the bishop on b2. So after knight g4, knight to c2 was played by Carlsen, and now comes knight d to f6. Better to leave this move for later, as they always say, the threat is stronger than the execution. And here Carlsen played queen to e1, and it's a bit of a peculiar move. It's hard to say what the idea is here. Maybe after knight to f2 he thought about playing something like knight to d1 to try and exchange this knight, but this actually doesn't work due to a devious tactic, that is knight to d3. This comes with an attack on the queen and on the bishop on b2, and if you capture the knight you get e2, and it's a much better position for black. So after this queen to e1, Grishchuk plays bishop to b5, again the strongest move. We have knight to d4, and now bishop to e4. Carlsen captures, knight captures, we have knight captures, and now knight to e6. There were a couple of moves to consider here, but like I said, Carlsen has to win this game if he wants to win sole first place, and he goes for the win. Knight to e6. Now this knight is no longer protected by the rook. The knight jumps to e6 with a tempo on the queen, so the knight pretty much has to be captured. Also, there's a double attack on the bishop on g7. So after knight to e6, Grishchuk captures it, f captures, and we have bishop captures on g7. And here, if you play something like king captures on g7 after bishop captures on e4, it's a perfectly fine position for white. But after bishop captures on g7, Grishchuk again plays the absolute best move, that is knight to d2. Getting the knight out of the way, attacking again the rook on f1, and now Carlsen has to do something about this bishop on g7. So bishop back to b2, Grishchuk grabs the exchange, knight captures on f1, we have queen captures on f1, and there is only one good move for black here, and Grishchuk finds it, that is e5. You have to play e5. If you allow d captures on e6, then this bishop becomes alive, and it will be a bad game for Grishchuk. So e5 and queen to f3. An interesting idea by Carlsen and a good move. Now if knight to f2 comes, this doesn't trap the queen on f1. And here probably the best move was actually knight to f2, as the knight is now attacked on g4. After knight to f2, it's still a better position for Grischuk, and Grischuk here plays h5, and this is a small inaccuracy that Carlsen didn't take advantage of. After h5, Carlsen had to play queen to e4. After this queen to e4, queen comes to e4 with tempo, attacks the g6 pawn. You have to defend this after something like king to h7. Now you play h3, and after something like knight to f6, you have queen captures on e3, and white is okay here. There is compensation for the exchange. But after this h5 inaccuracy by Grischuk, Carlsen makes an inaccuracy of his own, and he really can't afford inaccuracies here, as he did sacrifice the exchange. He played h3 immediately, and he allowed this trapping move, pawn to e4. Now the queen has to move, queen to f1 was played, and now comes knight to h6. There, you could have considered something like knight to f6 or maybe knight to f2, but actually knight to h6 is the absolute best move and is the only move that gives Grischuk the advantage. Now you're preventing Carlsen to push f5. Also, this knight is now coming to f5 to threaten g3 to support e3. It's a very unpleasant position for Carlsen. So king to h2 by Carlsen, and simply rook to c8. You develop a rook, preparing ideas like rook to c2 maybe, to go for the bishop, infiltrating the position, and Carlsen counters this with rook to c1. We have knight to f5, queen to e1, queen to e7, and now rook to c4. Preparing queen to c3, Carlsen wants to get something for his exchange sacrifice. Rook captures on c4, b captures on c4, and now rook to c8, again going for the c4 pawn, and Carlsen plays queen to c3. Now definitely threatening a queen to h8. And simply king to h7 by Grischuk. We have a4, b6, and now bishop to a1, preparing queen to b2. Carlsen doesn't want his queen to be on the same file as this rook. So a6, Grischuk now prepares b5 and queen to b2. Now b5 is no longer a threat. And Carlsen does offer the c4 pawn, but you can't really capture it since queen to h8 will be checkmate. So g5, and when I saw this g5 move, I mean, there were a lot of ideas for Grischuk here. Do you push h4? Do you go for the play on the queen side? Do you maybe try and improve before you push? But Grischuk actually played the g5 here, and when I saw this move, I thought, since Grischuk was low on time, but that doesn't really matter. Grischuk is always low on time. When I saw this g5 move, I thought that's a blunder. I mean, simply g4 must win for Carlsen. The problem is, and I can't, I was really amazed at how fast Grischuk saw that g4 doesn't work. The idea is that after g4, you can't really move the knight. If you move the knight, bishop captures c4 with check. You can't capture because you get queen to g7 checkmate, as the knight has moved from f5. So I really didn't see the idea why g4 doesn't work. But it doesn't work because of h captures, and now you don't move the knight. You simply play g captures on f4. And after g captures knight on f5, you have queen to h4 check, king to g1, and now queen to e1 check, king to h2, and now rook to g8, and there is no defense against queen to g3 checked, followed by queen to g2 checkmate. Whatever you play, I mean, if you move the bishop, if you, for example, capture the e4 pawn, then queen to g1 is coming. There really isn't a good move here. Or even better, if you capture, then simply queen to h4 immediately is checkmate. And of course, if you play a slow move, then simply queen to g3 followed by queen captures g2, this is checkmate. And it took Grischuk like seconds to figure out that g5 is actually a great move. So g5 by Grischuk, and here Carlsen saw that g4 of course doesn't work. He played queen to b1, maybe thinking about capturing this e4 pawn if Grischuk continues on the king side, but Grischuk simply calmly plays rook captures on c4. He grabs the pawn. The rook is now defending the e4 pawn. Queen back to b2. Carlsen again threatens queen to h8. Rook goes back, and we have bishop captures on e4. As there really isn't a move here Carlsen can play, he tries this devious sacrifice to get at least some counterplay. He plays bishop captures on e4, queen captures, and now queen to f6. Okay, you could have some threats here with queen to f7 check, maybe grabbing the h5 pawn. Also f captures on g5 will maybe do something. And again, Grischuk has only one move that allows him to keep his advantage, and that is rook to g8. That is exactly what he plays. F captures on g5 by Carlsen, and we have h4 now. King to g1, not allowing that pawn to be captured with check. We have queen to b1 check by Grischuk, king back to g2, queen e4, king back to g1. Both of them figuring out what to play, as they're both low on time, and h captures on g3. And here Carlsen plays h4. The problem with a move like queen to f7 is that it really doesn't do anything. For example, knight to g7, and now queen to f6. Okay, you do threat and checkmate on h6, but simply queen to g6, and Carlsen has nothing here. So after this h captures on g3, Carlsen tried with h4, queen to b1 check, king g2, again queen e4, king g1, queen b1, king to g2, and now Grischuk took the time while he was moving the queen around to actually calculate that knight captures on h4 was a great move. This comes with check, king captures on g3, and now if Grischuk isn't careful, queen to h6 does come with checkmate, so he can't make a slow move. Queen to e1 was played, now this comes as a check and also defends the knight on h4. King to h3, now queen to h1 check, king g4, and now queen to e4 check. There was actually a much better solution, that is queen to g2 check, but in time trouble you don't really have the luxury of finding moves like this. Sacrifice simply the knight on h4 after king captures, queen h2 check, king g4, now you capture the pawn on e2, king g3, and now simply queen to f2 check. You exchange queens, queen captures, pawn captures, king captures, and here comes rook captures on g5 with an easily winning endgame. But after king to g4, okay, Grischuk played queen to e4 check, king comes to h5, and now comes the only move that actually gives Grischuk still the advantage. That's queen to g6. You have to exchange queens. King captures knight on h4. Now comes queen captures bishop. King captures queen, bishop captures queen, and king to g6. And now it's both players have 4 pawns, but Grischuk has a rook against the bishop. And this is an easily winning endgame. Doesn't really matter that Grischuk is very low on time. King g4, b5, a captures, king f4, rook to e8, cutting the king off so the king can't approach the pawns on the queen side. Bishop to c3, but now comes rook c8. You can't really play a blockading move like bishop to b4 to go for this pawn, because rook to c4 check picks up the bishop. So bishop back to f6, rook to c5, king captures e3, rook captures d5, king to e4, now comes rook d1, king f3, b4, and after e4, Grischuk played rook to e1, and here Carlsen really doesn't have any move to play, so in this position, Magnus Carlsen resigned the game. And I don't really know what the final standings are. I know that going into round 15, this is the last round of the World Rapid Championship, Carlsen was tied with Anand with 10 points, but if he won this game, since Anand drew his game against Bu immediately after 12 moves, he would have been the sole champion, but now that he lost this game against Grischuk, I will have to check. I will do another video in the honor of the winner and see who the actual winner of the World Rapid Championship is. So yeah, that's the game. I do hope you enjoyed it. And what do you think of Carlsen's opening choice in this game? I mean, he had to go for the win. He had no other choice. What would you have done in this position? So yeah. As usual, you can check 2 of my previous videos here. Thank you all for watching, and I will see you soon with probably another game from the World Rapid Championship, honoring the winner of this wonderful event. See you soon.